Alright, so if you are new to the channel, then chances are you've not seen previous videos where I talk about this guy named Robert Kiyosaki. Because you got this one, and this one, and this one. And the reason I talk about this guy a lot is because he wrote this book. There's this book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I read this when I was much, much younger. A lot less white hairs than I have right now, but this was the book that shifted my mindset and helped me to achieve the amount of wealth that I've achieved to this day. And I give Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad, Poor Dad a lot of credit with that. Now, anytime you hear the name Robert Kiyosaki, it does bring on some controversy in how he was able to amass his wealth. But you still can't discount the books that he's written, the courses and the content that he's created, the seminars that he's led, and all the lives that he has impacted. Because of that, he has had some major success. And I was able to find some of the best interviews that he did that just talked about what led to his success, what made him different, what helped him achieve what he's been able to achieve. So we're gonna find out what those 7 key success principles that Robert Kiyosaki contributes to his success. Let's find out what they are right now.
But you are the Robin Hood of knowledge, because I see you giving this knowledge out, and do the rich people cringe and say, don't tell them that, Rob?
Yes. Don't tell people what you know. Right. Keep them poor. But unfortunately, the poor will always be amongst us, because it starts up here. Because rich, poor, middle class, poverty starts with a fundamental attitude. When they say I can't afford it or I can't do that, they go down. They become what they say. My PhD daddy says, what do you think I am, made of money? I can't afford that. And my rich dad would say, that's why he's poor.
Right. And your rich dad used to say what instead of I can't afford it?
How can I afford it? How can I do that? What would it take, or why should I do that? He says that a question opens the mind, a statement closes the mind. See, when you say I can't afford it, your mind shuts down and you become what you say. That's the frightening thing. So what Mr. Lipton was saying, what Trump and I are saying, and what Jim Rickards and Nomi Prinz, we're saying we got to change what we teach our kids.
Right. Try to change that soul, that DNA, and introduce a real different mindset.
Yeah. And finally, through persistence, my rich dad started teaching me about money on one condition. And that condition was he would never pay me. He says, the moment I pay you, you think like an employee. He says, that's the trap. Entrepreneurs work for free. And now I'm 9 years old, my head's going cracking in half. He says, you never want a paycheck. You understand that, kid? I said, okay, I got it. And he says, well, how do I make money? He says, that's what entrepreneurs figure out.
The other thing the poor don't understand is the number one expense for most people is taxes. And yet we don't even see it. Isn't that weird? You walk around and you look at the paycheck and say, that doesn't seem right. And you don't realize that the government's got a huge hand in your pocket and you are doing nothing to minimize that. Again, this is what's very different about the rich and the poor.
Well, the reason the rich don't work for money is number one expense is tax. See, there's 3 kinds of income: earned, portfolio, passive. So earned income is if I get a job, that's earned income. If I'm a doctor or a programmer, that's earned income because I'm working for it. If I buy, let's say, Apple for $10 and I sell it for $20, that's portfolio income, capital gains.
Yeah.
But passive income, which is cash flow, is never taxed. So it's not, and so these guys are screaming right now in America, tax the rich. I said, good luck. Because most of the guys complaining, they don't know there's 3 kinds of income. And the rich don't have jobs anyway. They have assets. And so the average schmo out there, poor guy, sent the kid to school. They don't learn this. First of all, I want to talk about the importance of education. You see, in the world today, we go to school for academic education, reading and writing. Now that's very, very important. Professional education is where they become, a doctor or a mechanic or a web programmer or whatever you do. So professional education is very important. And the third type of education that's required, especially today, to be successful is financial education. And unfortunately, our school systems do not teach us much about money. For some reason, our school systems seem to think, that money might be the root of all evil or something. Yet to be successful in the world today, financial education is extremely important. Because of this lack of financial education, we see the rich getting excessively rich. So the gap between the rich and the poor is dangerously extreme. Many of the middle class are going from middle class to poor. So that's why financial education is crucial today if you want to, keep your head above water. Because ultimately, this is your greatest asset. You are responsible for your education and what goes in your head. I wasn't good academically. I'm not too strong professionally. I'm a wealthy person because my rich dad took the time to teach me the importance of financial education. So the reason it works is this is the cone of learning. It was created by a man named Professor Edgar Dale. And in 1969, he came up with the cone of learning, and he said, this is how human beings are designed to learn. Notice the worst way to learn is by reading. And the second worst way is lecture, listening to boring teachers. That's why I was never at school. Anyway, that's not really, I was there, but anyway. And then what you guys are doing here is you're looking at pictures, watching a movie. That's why TED Talks works. But also, the second best way is called simulation. Simulation is where you get to make your mistakes. You get to make your mistakes after mistakes. You just make mistakes. See, human beings learn by making mistakes, except in school you make mistakes, you're considered stupid. In business, you make a mistake, you're fired, and you make a mistake in business, you're a failure. So a person's got to find a place to make mistakes. In scientists like Edison, it was a laboratory. So the reason I learned a lot was I made mistakes playing Monopoly. That's how I learned so much. And today I play Monopoly in real life. My wife and I have over 10,000 units, several hotels, golf courses, and oil wells. But that's the game. Once you learn it in your brain by playing games, simulation's the way you learn. So you practice, 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 practice. You make mistake after mistake after mistake. Like a golfer makes a mistake after mistake after mistake, then they turn pro. But the reason a lot of people are not rich, they think mistakes make you stupid. It's criminal. A baby cannot learn to walk unless they fall down. You can't learn to ride a bicycle until you fall off the bicycle. So that's where our school system's letting us down. So I love the military because they taught us to make mistake after mistake after mistake. Every day we flew, we practiced emergency procedures, and every day I killed my engine to fly my aircraft without an engine. And this here is me doing the real thing. I went down 3 times in Vietnam. And if not for practicing crashing, I wouldn't be here today. All 5 of my crew came home alive. Don't let failure ever stop you. Use your brain, use your creativity. For example, look at Slack. That thing came out, and that was a complete failure. They too tried a game. The game didn't work, but whatever Slack was became the success, was a dialogue on the side of it. So it's one of the most important messages I have for entrepreneurs is that failure should inspire you to get smarter. And unfortunately, our school system says if you fail, you're stupid. That is not true. We learn from our mistakes. Mistakes are opportunities to get smarter, be humble, and take a look at something. The biggest complaint about my generation is millennials know all the answers, but they can't do anything. And the reason they can't do anything is because you might hurt somebody's feelings, you might make a mistake, and that just keeps you guys just trapped in this little box here.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I think millennial money is such an important point here. Because if you're going to come into my world, old guy's world, or the information age, you've really got to understand what is risky and what is not risky. And in my world, if you play it safe, that makes you stupid. Because if you don't take risks, you don't get smarter.
Yeah.
So you may know the answer, but you can't do anything. So how do I learn about money? So he would just break out a Monopoly game board. So I would work for free. I'd pick up cigarette butts, and he had hotels and restaurants, and I would clean and do menial tasks. And as I got older, I started getting into office work and marketing and accounting, and I was an apprentice basically, but I always worked for free. And he would teach me about money, but the way he taught me about money was playing Monopoly. And finally one day I got upset. I said, well, when are you going to teach me about money? He says, what do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He goes, no. what do you think we're doing? We're playing Monopoly. He says, what do you think we're doing? So I don't know. I'm teaching about money. You know, he says, there's many formulas for great success in money. There's thousands of them, but one of the best ones found on the game of Monopoly. It still is today. 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. I said, what? He says, one of the greatest ways to acquire great wealth is playing Monopoly in real life. 4 green houses, 1 red hotel. Is that all there is? He goes, that's it. And he says, what do you think I'm doing? And I went, I don't know. So then he took me out and he showed me his greenhouses. And 10 years later, when I was 19, I was now in school in New York, and I come back to Hawaii, and Rich Dad had bought the biggest piece of land smack dab in the middle of Waikiki Beach. And when you go to Waikiki Beach today, you'll see the Hyatt Regency Hotel. That was his hotel.
Just like the game of Monopoly.
Just like the game of Monopoly.
Acquired assets and they became bigger assets.
He just kept what's called an assemblage, because that property wasn't that big at that time. So he had to buy out all the small guys. Because Waikiki was a little dirt water little town. So he'd buy out this shop owner and buy that shop owner. And it took him a while, but he finally assembled this large piece of property. And then he and Hyatt put up this giant hotel. And it just sold for $800 million. So that's how I learned about money.
I don't know what the heck with people think about money, but that's what I get a lot of, is kind of this, well, you know, money's not spiritual. I'm just saying it's your attitudes, you know, a person's attitude towards money. I make a lot of money, but I give a lot, you know what I mean? It goes to biblical principle, the more you give, the more you receive. So when I meet somebody doesn't have any money, it just means they're not giving something. You know, so a lot of times there's people who would like more, but they're not giving anything. So they're like my poor dad. You know, he belonged to the labor unions, and he wanted to work less and get paid more. Well, that's anti-religious to me. If you want to get paid more, work more, give more. That's how I see it.